Let's talk about something most people only whisper about: intimacy after 45. Here's the truth. Women over 45 are confident, self-aware, and done pretending to be anything other than exactly who they are. And that confidence shows up in every part of life, including how they connect with a partner. Intimacy after 45 doesn't fade, it evolves. If you're partnered with a woman over 45, or you're drawn to one, you might be picking up on signals that feel confusing. You might think she's lost interest in closeness, when really her body and her needs are just asking for something different than they used to. That doesn't mean less effort. It means smarter, more intentional effort. In this video, I'm going to walk you through what actually shifts in a woman's body, hormones, and nervous system after 45. What she really wants emotionally and physically, and how you can show up in a way that makes her feel desired, safe, and fully connected, without pressure, without guesswork, and without confusion. Stick around to the end because I've got a free resource that can help both of you get more out of your connection. Here's the first thing every partner needs to understand. Women over 45 have been through enough relationships, enough experience, and enough self-discovery that they're not interested in performing for anyone's benefit, including yours. In her 20s and 30s, she might have spent a lot of energy guiding you, explaining what she liked, gently coaching you toward what worked. By the time a woman reaches her mid-40s, she's generally not interested in running that class anymore. She expects a partner to have picked up the basics of attentiveness and care along the way. That's not an unreasonable demand. It's just a shift in what she's willing to spend her energy on. Interestingly, research on sexual satisfaction has found that younger women report faking enthusiasm or satisfaction more often than older women do. Older women tend to be far more direct. They're not going to pretend something is working when it isn't. And if a partner isn't paying attention, an older woman is far more likely to simply stop initiating, rather than fake her way through it. That's not difficult behavior, that's honesty. It's actually a gift if you choose to see it that way, because it means you always know where you stand. Let's get into what's actually happening biologically, because understanding the why changes how you respond. Some research suggests that women over 45 report equal or even greater satisfaction in their intimate lives compared to younger women. And the leading explanation is fascinating. It's not that their bodies work better. It's that older women tend to be more in tune with their own needs and far less focused on performance, frequency, or meeting some external standard. They have less to prove, so they're more present for what's actually happening. At the same time, hormone levels, particularly estrogen and testosterone, begin to shift and decline for most women during this stage of life. This isn't just a mood or libido issue, it's a full-body change in how arousal and comfort work. Estrogen plays a major role in maintaining tissue elasticity, blood flow, and natural lubrication. As estrogen drops, many women experience increased sensitivity and reduced natural lubrication, which can make certain kinds of touch uncomfortable if there isn't enough warm-up beforehand. Testosterone, even though it's often associated with men, also plays an important role in women's desire, fantasy life, and overall sensitivity. When testosterone declines, spontaneous desire, that out-of-nowhere, I'm in the mood feeling, tends to decline too. That doesn't mean she's lost interest in you. It means her body now needs more build-up, more connection, and more intentional stimulation before desire kicks in. It's worth pointing out that this hormonal picture doesn't move in a straight line. Many women describe the years leading up to and through menopause as unpredictable. Some weeks feel like nothing has changed, and others bring noticeable shifts in energy, mood, sleep, and comfort. Sleep disruption in particular has a bigger effect on desire and connection than people tend to realize. A woman who's been waking up multiple times a night for weeks is going to experience intimacy very differently than one who's well rested, regardless of how she feels about her partner. The same goes for stress. The hormones tied to stress and the hormones tied to desire are closely linked. So a stretch of high stress at work or at home can quiet desire in ways that have nothing to do with the relationship itself. Recognizing that these biological and lifestyle factors are doing a lot of the work here, rather than assuming it's always about attraction or interest, takes a lot of unnecessary pressure off both partners. Here's what that means in practical terms. A woman over 45 is generally less drawn to rushed, low-effort encounters than she might have been in her 20s. She's more likely to want something intentional. Fewer encounters, perhaps, but ones that are deeply satisfying. And there's a reason for that beyond simple preference. If an encounter is rushed, underprepared, or lacking emotional presence, her body genuinely feels the after effects, sometimes for a day or more. Over time, that kind of experience starts to feel like an obligation rather than something to look forward to. But when there's enough warmth, patience, attention, and the right kind of physical preparation, her body can fully relax and engage. And that positive experience can linger in a good way for days afterward. So instead of frequency being the goal, many women over 45 would rather have one deeply connected, well-prepared experience every week or two than several rushed ones. It's not about having less intimacy, it's about having better intimacy, more pleasure, less pressure. That's the real upgrade most couples are missing. So how do you actually keep up with these changes? Let's break down 3 of the most important shifts to understand. First, arousal simply takes longer, and that means patience has to come before anything physical. This isn't about her needing extra romance because she's not in the mood. It's biology. Estrogen plays a direct role in blood flow and tissue readiness, and as estrogen drops, the body needs more time to fully prepare. If you move too quickly, you risk discomfort, and repeated uncomfortable experiences can lead to her avoiding intimacy altogether, not because she doesn't want connection, but because her body has learned to brace against discomfort. Giving her body the time it needs isn't optional extra effort. It's the foundation everything else is built on. Second, meaningful, attentive connection isn't a nice bonus. It's a requirement, not an afterthought. This isn't the kind of casual, low-effort connection that might have worked in your 20s. This is what some call grown folks intimacy. Connection that engages someone mentally and emotionally, not just physically. As hormone levels shift, arousal becomes more delicate and easier to disrupt. If attention lapses, or a partner seems distracted, disengaged, or checked out, it's much harder to recover that mood than it would have been at a younger age. The recovery curve is longer. Once that emotional connection breaks, it takes real time and effort to rebuild it. So you really have 2 choices. Invest the energy up front and enjoy a much better outcome, or skip the build-up and watch her emotionally withdraw. The math isn't complicated. Third, Emotional tone is the gateway to physical comfort and openness. When people are younger, physical chemistry can sometimes override emotional context. You can be irritated with someone and still feel physically drawn to them in the moment. After 40, that changes. Context becomes central. One study looking at women over 40 found that relationship quality, psychological well-being, and how a woman was experiencing midlife changes were all strong predictors of how satisfied she felt in her intimate life, often more predictive than age itself. In other words, it's not just about technical skill. It's about how safe, respected, and emotionally connected she feels before anything physical even begins. If the emotional tone feels off, if she feels criticized, rushed, or emotionally distant from her partner, her body simply won't relax and open up the way it would otherwise. That's not rejection. That's her nervous system doing exactly what nervous systems are built to do, protecting her when something doesn't feel safe. It's not a flaw, it's biology working as intended. There's a particularly interesting finding worth mentioning here. Among women over 45 who are in committed relationships, age by itself is not actually the strongest predictor of how satisfied they feel. Relationship satisfaction and the quality of communication between partners matter far more. That single insight should change how you think about this entire topic. If a woman feels judged, rushed, or pressured in any part of the relationship, that tension doesn't stay contained to one area of life. It affects everything, including how safe she feels being physically vulnerable with you. So let's get specific. What does a woman over 45 actually want from her partner when it comes to physical and emotional intimacy? She wants a partner who genuinely understands her needs and prioritizes them. She wants to feel desired, not merely tolerated or accommodated. She wants presence. That means full attention, not a partner who's distracted, half-checked out, or glued to a phone. She wants to feel attractive and appreciated, and she wants her partner to take basic personal care seriously too, staying clean, well-groomed, and generally putting in the same effort she's putting in. Mutual effort matters enormously here. Feeling chosen matters. She wants to sense genuine enthusiasm and desire from her partner. Not performative interest, but something real. When that energy is missing, she notices almost immediately, and it changes how safe and wanted she feels. She also wants romance that isn't limited to a single moment. She wants a partner who plans ahead, who puts thought into the relationship outside of any specific encounter. Bringing a small gift, making her laugh, being playful and flirtatious, not as a means to an end, but because there's genuine affection there. These things matter enormously, and they matter more as people get older, not less. Genuine flirtation is a skill, and it's one worth developing. A thoughtful text earlier in the day, a sincere compliment, a comment about something you appreciate about her. These small gestures build anticipation and emotional safety long before anything physical happens. Because her body needs more lead time to feel ready, that lead time should start hours or even a full day in advance, not minutes. She wants a partner who comes prepared, who understands that her body may need different kinds of support now than it did years ago, and who treats that with confidence rather than awkwardness or embarrassment. A partner who's informed, who's done a little research, who isn't afraid to have an open conversation about what works now versus what used to work. That kind of preparedness reads as care, not as a lack of romance. She wants confidence without arrogance, leadership without control, and attentiveness instead of guesswork. All of this groundwork, the texts, the compliments, the planning, the patience, is itself a form of foreplay. By the time anything physical happens, the emotional connection should already be well underway. This is where a lot of couples get stuck, not because they don't care about each other, but because nobody ever taught them how to talk openly about intimacy without defensiveness, awkwardness, or shame. It becomes this unspoken thing everyone knows is there, but nobody addresses directly. None of this requires grand gestures or constant effort. It's mostly about consistency in small things. A short, sincere text in the middle of the day, noticing when she's had a hard day and adjusting plans accordingly, remembering something she mentioned in passing weeks ago and bringing it up again. These small signals tell her she's being paid attention to as a whole person, not just in the moments leading up to intimacy. That kind of consistent attentiveness does more for connection over time than any single romantic gesture ever could, because it builds a baseline of trust and safety that everything else gets to rest on. And that's exactly why open communication has to be at the center of this conversation. Let's talk about what that actually sounds like in practice, because communicate more is advice almost everyone has heard, and almost nobody knows how to act on. A good starting point is asking open, low-pressure questions outside of any intimate moment, not in the bedroom, not in the middle of anything, but during a calm, ordinary part of the day. Something as simple as, "What's been feeling good for you lately, and is there anything you'd want more of?" opens a door without putting anyone on the spot. Notice that question doesn't assume a problem exists. It just creates space for honesty. Another useful approach is checking in afterward, gently and without anxiety in your voice. How did that feel for you? And then actually sitting with the answer, instead of getting defensive or rushing to fix things on the spot. If she mentions discomfort, the right response is curiosity, not an apology spiral. Something like, "Thank you for telling me. What would make that better next time?" Keeps the conversation moving forward, instead of making her feel like she has to manage your feelings about her feedback. It also helps to talk about expectations before they become unspoken sources of tension. If frequency has changed, naming that directly. "I've noticed things have shifted a bit, and I want to understand what's going on for you, not just assume," does far more for a relationship than silently keeping score or quietly resenting the change. Couples who talk openly about these shifts tend to adapt to them together. Couples who don't tend to drift into misreading each other, one partner assuming rejection, the other assuming pressure, when neither is actually true. It's worth normalizing, too, that bringing in tools or aids, whether that's lubrication, certain kinds of products, or simply researching what works well for women at this life stage, isn't unromantic. It's the opposite. It signals that you've thought about her experience specifically, rather than assuming what worked years ago still applies today. A partner who approaches this with curiosity and confidence, rather than awkwardness or avoidance, tends to make the whole topic far less loaded for both people. If you want a practical way to start having these conversations with more confidence and less awkwardness, I've put together a free guide that walks through exactly how to talk about intimacy, what questions to ask each other, and how to keep growing together as a couple over time. I'll drop a link for that below. free for a limited time for anyone watching this video. Let's talk through a few scenarios that come up constantly because seeing them named out loud tends to be more useful than abstract advice. Scenario 1. She seems less interested than she used to be, and her partner quietly starts to take that personally, wondering if he's still attractive to her, if something's wrong in the relationship, if she's losing interest in him specifically. Often, none of that is actually true. What's happening is a hormonal and physical shift that has nothing to do with how she feels about her partner, and everything to do with how her body currently responds to spontaneous desire. The fix here isn't reassurance seeking or pressure. It's a direct conversation. I've noticed a change and I want to understand it, not take it personally. That single sentence, said with genuine curiosity instead of anxiety, diffuses an enormous amount of unspoken tension. Scenario 2. An encounter doesn't go well. Maybe there's discomfort. Maybe the timing feels off. And instead of addressing it, both partners quietly avoid the topic afterward. Avoidance feels safer in the moment, but it compounds. The next attempt carries the weight of the last one. And pretty soon, intimacy starts to feel like something fraught rather than something enjoyable. Breaking that cycle usually takes one slightly uncomfortable but honest conversation. Naming what happened without blame, and talking through what might help next time. That one conversation usually does more to repair things than weeks of silent avoidance. Scenario 3. One partner assumes that because things have changed, they have to settle for less overall. Less connection, less closeness, lower expectations. This is probably the most common misread of all, and it's the one most worth correcting. The shift isn't a ceiling, it's a redirection. Couples who lean into what actually works now, more patience, more communication, more emotional presence, frequently describe their connection at this stage as deeper and more satisfying than it was years earlier, not less. The couples who struggle are usually the ones still trying to operate by the old rules instead of learning the new ones. Intimacy after 45 is often better than it's ever been, because of a kind of paradox. When emotional safety, physical comfort, and real presence come together, connection becomes more honest, more intentional, and far less about performance. There's no more pretending, no more guessing games, no more pressure to be something you're not. This isn't a decline, it's a refinement. She knows herself better than she ever has. She understands her own needs, her own boundaries, and her own desires, with a clarity that often takes decades to build. And if her partner meets her there, with patience, communication, and genuine care, the connection that results can be deeper and more meaningful than anything either person experienced earlier in life. So here's what I want you to take away from all of this. Women over 45 don't want less intimacy, they want better intimacy. They want to feel desired, emotionally supported, and physically comfortable enough to fully relax and be present. When those pieces are in place, desire doesn't disappear. It transforms into something steadier, deeper, and in many ways more rewarding than what came before. And this isn't just about women. When physical and emotional connection fades from a relationship, it affects both partners. Hormones, mood, confidence, and the way people bond with each other. Men going through this stage of a relationship often experience their own version of self-doubt. A man whose partner has pulled back physically can start to internalize that as a reflection of his own desirability or worth, when in reality, it usually has far more to do with what's happening in her body than anything about him. That internal spiral, quietly assuming rejection, then either withdrawing or overcompensating, tends to make things worse rather than better. The partners who navigate this stage well are usually the ones who can separate "this is changing" from "this means something is wrong with me," and bring curiosity instead of insecurity to the conversation. That's actually the focus of my next video, where I break down exactly what happens in a man's body and mind when intimacy disappears from a relationship, and why ongoing connection matters for men's health too. Make sure you watch that one next. Before you go, here's a quick recap of the key takeaways from today's conversation, because I want this to actually be useful and not just something you nod along to and forget. Number 1, women over 45 are direct, not difficult. If something isn't working, you'll likely hear about it honestly, rather than have it performed for your benefit. And that honesty is something to appreciate, not fear. Number 2, hormonal shifts are real, and they change the timeline for everything, from arousal to recovery from emotional disconnection. Patience isn't a courtesy here, it's a requirement built into the biology of this stage of life. Number 3, emotional safety comes before physical comfort, every single time. If the emotional tone of a relationship is off, no amount of technical effort in the moment will fix that. Number 4, preparation and communication are forms of respect. Taking the time to understand what your partner needs now, having honest conversations about it, and showing up consistently are far more valuable than trying to guess your way through it. And number 5, this stage of a relationship isn't a downgrade from what came before. For a lot of couples, it's an upgrade, if both partners are willing to put in the understanding it requires. If you found this helpful, the best thing you can do is start an honest conversation with your partner about some of what we covered today. You don't have to bring up every single point at once. Start small. Ask her how she's feeling these days, what she'd like more of, what she'd like less of. Listen without getting defensive. That conversation alone will do more for your connection than almost anything else you could try. If you're newer to this channel, I talk regularly about relationships, intimacy, and connection at every stage of life. Not just the parts that are easy to talk about, but the parts that actually matter and tend to get skipped over because they feel awkward. If that's useful to you, go ahead and subscribe so you don't miss future conversations like this one. And if you have questions about anything we covered today, drop them in the comments. I read through as many as I can, and sometimes the best topics for future videos come directly from what you all are asking.